I have a quarter. Totally awesome video game. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by once again, coming your way with one of my famed movie/Blu-ray reviews. Today I'm very delighted, not really, to come your way to review the movie and most recent Blu-ray release of Joysticks. Totally awesome video game! As always, I'll be reviewing the movie first, and then I will review the most recent Blu-ray release of the film. So my history with Joysticks doesn't go very far back at all. I can only assume I may have seen this video, the cover art on a VHS in the 80s, 90s. It's possible. Incidentally, I do think the poster art / cover art is very good back in the heyday of the 70s, and in this case the early 80s, when they had all these very, very talented artists paint all these movie posters. I don't know if it looks like it's possibly the same guy who did like the poster for Meatballs and Student Bodies. It looks like it very well might be that guy. Whoever the hell it is definitely knows how to capture the female form. Definitely love the poster, and honestly the poster is probably one of the best things about this movie, in addition to like the theme song that is heard in the opening credits of this movie. And incidentally, the opening credits of this movie is also probably one of the best parts of this movie. So I first saw this probably on Prime, maybe, I don't know if it would have been 2017 or 2018. At that time I knew that a DVD had come out, like a very limited to 1,000. Was it Scorpion releasing? And the DVD, or not the DVD, the Blu-ray rather, had come out by Scorpion releasing, limited to 1,000 copies, and I knew it was, going for a high price on eBay as a result, being out of print and limited to 1,000. And I'm like, God, not that I'll probably ever pay that price, or whatever price people were asking. So I'm like, well, it's free on Prime, I might as well watch it. And I remember when I first saw it, way back whenever it was, 2017 or 18, the opening credits, I was actually really excited about the movie because the opening credits are really cool. Just shots of some hot chick playing these early 80s, video games and stuff, and the song they came up with for the opening credits is really cool. So I was really excited. And so we'll just cut to yesterday when I actually watched the Blu-ray. I don't think I'd seen the movie all the way. I can't remember. I might have shown Beth. It did show up on Tubi, and it's actually still, as of the day I'm recording this review, still on Tubi. There's two versions. There's like the normal version and I think the Spanish language version or something. That may or may not still be the case when you're watching this review, months, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries later. But I may have showed Beth this a couple of years ago or something. I can't remember, but regardless, it did. And then 2024 rolled around and it came out on Blu-ray, courtesy of MVD Rewind Collection, and then I kind of like, oh, the thing's more affordable now, maybe I should get it. And I put it in my cart on Amazon, and it sat there for quite a few months and stuff. I think, well, I don't know if it was $20 or something. Recently it came down to 15 or something, and I'm like, you know what, I think I'm gonna buy me some Joysticks Blu-ray fun, quote unquote, for $15 or whatever the hell it came down to. And cut to seeing it, just rewatching it again yesterday, I'm like, oh God. So the director, on the little interview that's featured with the producer director, he mentioned the whole precipice, or not precipice, but the whole reason for this movie came about just he was at I don't know if it was a premiere or showing for his latest film, and he saw in the lobby a bunch of kids, teenagers, maybe 20-somethings, playing, standing in front in lines of these video game arcade machines. And he's like, God, what are they all doing? What are those things? And he's kind of like, oh, once he understood maybe a little more what they were all about, video games, he was like, oh, well, this would be a good kind of a raunchy, sexy comedy. I could build a movie around this, and sure enough, he did. The whole movie's I honestly probably, even for $15, probably kind of regret buying this Blu-ray, but what the hell, it's actually, as we'll get into later on, it's actually pretty nice packaging, and MVD Rewind Collection did a pretty good job with their Blu-ray release of it. But not much I can really say about the movie. It's basically just revolves around, it's a TNA, R-rated TNA kind of what's that rude, crude, quote-unquote comedy that just revolves around a video arcade and video games and a video arcade, and the whole big, whopping premise of this movie is this video arcade that's doing well or whatever. All these hot chicks frequent. This guy's old grandpa, I think, rich grandpa, is the one who bought it. This guy who's in his early mid-20s, whatever. He'd later go on to show up in was it Star Trek 3? The Search for Spock. He talks to Uhura. He's like, "Have you lost all your sense of reality?" Or kind of a snooty, person in young guy in Star Trek 3, the Wrath of God, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and have you lost your all sense of reality or something? I think it's the same guy who later on would not long after Joysticks would end up in Star Trek 3 in a small part. But that guy's kind of like the hunky, the guy who runs the arcade where all these hot chicks coming. In addition to, of course, your kind of overweight, rude, crude, farting, just nasty kind of, in this era, it was all about, kind of a, Animal House was a big movie, or a popular movie, and they had John Belushi, was kind of the obnoxious, slob, heavier set guy. So as a result, a lot of these kind of, quote unquote comedies feel like they got to have one of these larger, heavier set, kind of rude, crude, comic relief guys as well. And honestly, that guy is probably, even though I don't enjoy a lot of his rudeness and crudeness and slob and sloppy and sloppy eating and all this and that, he's probably one of the maybe most memorable characters in this movie. But the whole premise of this movie is just this Joe Don Baker. I think he can be seen later on in Hunt for Red October. I don't know if he became like a politician. It seems to me he became like a politician later on, or I don't know if he was a politician turned actor, back to politician, I don't know what the hell he was. But even in the early 80s, apparently, he was a name. Joe Don Baker in, Joysticks. I'm sure it was a movie that he, holds in super high regard, I can only assume. But I guess he had previously worked with the producer-director of Joysticks in a movie previously, which happens when you previously work with someone. But yeah, Joe Don Baker plays this, I don't know, I can't remember if he's a politician or if he's just some rich guy in this movie. I can't remember why he wants the arcade shut down, but it's, the premise of these kind of 80s comedy movies where there's just a group of people, and then there's a group of, or in this case, just this guy with his henchmen against, this arcade, and he wants to get it shut down. I can't even remember why. All I know is this like hot blonde daughter who does this. She later, the first thing I can remember seeing her in is the two-part Flash episode, Revenge of the Trickster. It was the first time I saw that, it was on the VHS release of Flash 2, Revenge of the Trickster. But she plays the Trickster's whatever female, Harley Quinn kind of wannabe character in Flash 2, Revenge of the Trickster. And I think that's the only thing I can remember seeing her in. I'm like, oh wow, so this is like better part of a decade before her appearance in, those two Flash episodes or whatever. Maybe she's in more, I don't know. But those Flash 2 on VHS, Revenge of the Trickster, is how I first saw the two-part episode combined into a feature-length movie. But plays Joe Don Baker's kind of relatively attractive, daughter who's always hanging out there. And then you've got this guy who, he'd go on to be, the first time I think I saw this guy was Napoleon Dynamite, and because of the low-budget nature of that movie, I figured everyone in it was just starting out actor. Well, it turns out this guy, had been in movies for decades before Napoleon Dynamite, including this one. He's kind of the male lead of this punk rock group and he's got all these hanger-on-her chicks and stuff, and he'll just come and go and disrupt things. And honestly, I just rewatched this last night, and it's like a mind wipe. It's like I can't, he comes and goes. I can't remember if they like him or don't. I don't think they like him or whatever. And they always tell him to get out of there. And then they do this, video game off where it's like, if this guy wins, you get the hell out of here. If he loses, you can stay here or whatever. They do two of these game offs in this movie, where it's like, they play a video game to see who wins to decide the fate of later on the video arcade. But not a whole lot to see here, unfortunately. But I mean, You know, it's a TNA kind of a thing. So right off the bat, early in the movie, there's this, boobies, of course. I sound like Charles Band, but I actually kind of like bosoms. Bosoms is a fun word. So you get to, there's some, relatively decent bosoms to be shown in this movie. It's just a rated R, TNA comedy, just revolves around, video game arcade, and just whatever they can fill, put into the 80, whatever, barely 80 minutes to achieve their running time. And yeah, so incidentally, there's like a couple chicks, or maybe more than a couple, but there's this one chick that's, god dang, her body's really put together. That's all I'll say. And of course, you've got the nerd kid. The movie kind of starts with this nerd kid and the sorority. These two hot chicks play this sorority prank on this nerd kid, and I think it's like he gets the better end of the deal than they do. I mean, he gets to see both of them bosoms, naked bosoms, and all this and that, and face against bosoms. It's like he gets the better part of that. That's the kind of I guess, practical joke you want to be at, on his end of, in that case. Like he gets his face against bosoms and sees bosoms and all this and that. But yeah, I think I'd probably destroy my brain if I tried to, replay this in my head and figure out what the hell happens. And it's a bunch of nonsense, is what it boils down to, with boobies flashed here and there. I do kind of like the bit at the end where I don't know if they're in front of politicians or the mayor or whatever, and they're Joan Don Baker, who's against the arcade and wants to shut it down, and the grandson who's operating it is for it, wants to keep it open. They're each kind of saying their versions of what the arcade represents, and the version Joan Don Baker says is just this kind of just sex dungeon of hell, and it just shows the kind of the dreamlike version of the worst possible scenario for this arcade to be, the women just with whips and bosoms exposed, and just this sex freakery of a video game arcade. And then the other guy who wants to keep the arcade, it's just like this heavenly, just everyone's in white, and it's like a video game in heaven kind of thing, and everyone's prim and proper, and oh, whoops, my bosom accidentally rubbed against you, sorry. And that's probably some of the most creative aspect of this movie, that those two juxtaposed viewpoints of what the arcade, they're both completely skewed from one end to the other, from reality. But when I was trudging through this movie last night on the Blu-ray, and that's kind of closer to the end, I'm like, that's kind of actually creative, as opposed to the majority of the nonsense in this movie. So yeah, about halfway through or so, I was like, god dang it, good thing I didn't buy the original Blu-ray on eBay for $60, because I think $15 was a waste of money in this movie. So when I always thought of Joysticks, I always just, that cover poster art always kind of stuck with me, and the opening credits and the music, that's what I think of when I thought of Joysticks, not all the kind of, just filler. That is the majority of this movie, is just filler nonsense, just kind of repetitive, same stuff over and over. This joke with Joan Don Baker's wife, and oh my god. And anyway, yeah, not a whole hell of a lot to see here, I'm afraid. I don't think this is probably honestly a little high, but just because of the majority of the movie probably takes place in their makeshift. I can only assume they created this whole arcade for the purposes of the movie. The majority of the movie takes place in the arcade, so it's fun for someone who was born, in the 70s and grew up in, started to grow up in the late 70s, grew up all in the 80s. It's fun for someone of my generation to just basically, even if it's nonsense happening on screen, just to see all these classic arcade games in the background, and you get a glimpse of a machine back there, and you're half of a side or a half of a marquee, and you're just like, oh, that's that. That's Frogger, that's Space Invaders, that's Burger Time. It's just, even if nothing's going on, it's fun to just, see a movie where, and a lot of these, it's crazy because I think did they shoot this in 82? They may have shot this in 82. A lot of these video games, like even Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man, they were like 2 years old or a year old. Burger Time wouldn't have been very old. Like all of these cabinets in the movie are like really, really new when this movie was made. So it's really kind of interesting. It's like it's an interesting time capsule just to, for arcade, classic arcade enthusiasts just to watch, just to, even if nothing's of any kind of worth necessarily is going on screen when people have clothes on, at least you can just like oogle at these, freaking 2-year-old arcade cabinets of Pac-Man, or a year-old arcade cabinet of, Galaga or Miss Pac-Man, or Burger Time, whatever the case may be, So that's probably the best part. And honestly, the game offs they have, that one's kind of halfway through and one's more towards the end to decide the fate of the arcade. Those kind of big, huge, like joysticks they have with like a bowling ball on top and 2 buttons, and they're kind of lit up and stuff. I don't know if they would have created those for the movie or if those existed. Either way, those are actually really kind of cool, and with the buttons, of course, I think well, no, not all. One of the games they play is, I can't remember what it's, Satan's something, and it might need a button, but the second game they play in a game off is like, was it Super Pac-Man or whatever, which, you can see them hitting a button, and it's just like, there's no buttons for Super Pac-Man. So that was kind of funny. But those big, huge, like, joysticks that kind of are built into the ground and come out, and you're kind of, it's kind of a sexual, obviously, probably made for the movie, I would imagine, but kind of, clear bowling ball sized, joystick top with 2 buttons on each one, and they kind of have lights inside and stuff like that. That creation, which I can only assume is for the movie, is actually one of the, a creative aspect of the movie as well. But with all that creativity that can be found in this movie, let's face it, the majority of it is just nonsense. I think I was trying to give a star rating earlier, and like I say, this is probably a little high, but just because of like the nostalgia of the time it was made, and just those games being featured in the movie are so new at the time, was just insane. I can go as high, which isn't very high, maybe a little high for this movie. I can go as high as 1 star out of 4 stars for Joysticks. Watching it or rewatching it last night, I was like, God dang it, that's probably a waste of $15. But oh well, life goes on, as I say, and at least I waited for it to come down to, I can't remember what it was like when it came out, maybe 23, and then it came down to 20, and then it was like on sale for 15 or whatever, and I'm like, you know what, I'll get Joysticks for 15, and then when I watched it, I regretted it, but life does go on. Until it doesn't, as Sidney Pollack, I don't know how to Sidney Pollack once said. So on to my review of the Blu-ray, the most recently released Blu-ray by MVD Rewind Collection. Does anyone know what MVD stands for? I don't, but mine, as you can see, came with a slip cover. I wouldn't imagine that, as the months and years go by, you're going to be guaranteed a slip cover if you choose to buy this months or years later, but mine came with a slip cover, which is actually really cool. Kind of, the layout is kind of like a Atari 2600 cartridge packaging, which kind of makes no sense because this isn't a movie about Atari 2600 playing, it's about video game arcade playing. So, but there's really no like all around kind of recognizable packaging, I guess you could put, that would signify, I guess, just generic arcade game play in general. So they chose to package it up with the kind of Atari 2600 theme going for the artwork. You can also see in the bottom corner of this slip cover that says "New Inside Joysticks from MVD Laugh-Filled Mini Poster." We'll show you guys that in a bit. While we're looking at the cover, one thing I do want to mention, which is kind of goofy, is I think it's the first time it's ever happened on this cover art. I think it's something that MVD Rewind Collection decided to do for whatever reason. You can see that they added some like spaceships. There's a spaceship kind of on the top corner of the cabinet there, and there's one kind of methodically placed there over that the chick on the left there holding the joystick, and it's almost as if it's editing the image of her hand on the joystick. I don't know if someone at MVD Rewind Collection thought that for some reason the chick on the left holding the joystick was too suggestive or something. I can only assume that is why the spaceship is covering, you know, her holding the joystick. As you can see, the original theatrical poster doesn't have these three spaceships or rockets added. That's something that was added to this MVD Rewind Collection cover, which, like I say, I don't know, they got someone who's sensitive there, they're working at the company, saying that, you know, the chick on the left, the way that chick is holding the joystick is too suggestive, but the chick on the right is fine, so we'll let it go. But yeah, as you can see on the original theatrical poster, there's more of the actual shaft of the stick showing. So maybe whoever, you know, made that decision was just like, oh, I'm triggered by that. It's just too sexually suggestive. I mean, you're putting out this movie that's called Joysticks, and you know, you've got these women holding the joysticks. I mean, the whole, you know, you don't put out the movie and then like edit aspects of the cover. I just think that is so freaking weird. So, you know, some points lost for like basically editing the original theatrical poster art in this case. I think that's kind of pathetic. On the back here you can see it definitely goes with the continuing with the Atari 2600, you know, cartridge game packaging. Very simple and very, you know, as I said, Atari 2600 packaging. Like, there's a little synopsis here. When a successful businessman decides to shut down the local video emporium, a group of dedicated gamers battle to save the arcade. And in true, you know, form, sticking with the 2600 packaging, whatever motif they're going with here, it's really kind of fun. One viewer, two viewers, features, scene selection. That's really cool. One viewer or two viewers. You can actually probably have more than two viewers, but again, it's like a video game cartridge where it's one player or two players. As you can see, there's like a picture of a Blu-ray player here. It says use your Blu-ray player with this Joysticks motion picture video disc. One motion picture. Yeah, this movie is rated R by the Motion Pictures. But yeah, you can read all this stuff. Probably, maybe, hopefully, if you can read English. But it's cool, the little, you know, 2600 cartridge packaging motif they went with. Pretty cool. When you take the slipcover off, it looks like this, a little bit different. Same edited image, unfortunately, which is just kind of frustrating and goofy, but it's what the hell they did, I guess. The hell. Taking a look at the back, we can see special features. It says 2K scan and restoration in... Look at this. What is this, a typo? 2K scan and restoration in parentheses in 2015 parentheses. So there's like two, yeah, there's one too many ins there. 2K scan and restoration in 2015 from 35mm film elements and presented in 1080p in 1:7:8 aspect ratio. This is kind of interesting though. Audio is LPCM 2.0 mono, optional English subtitles. New fan commentary featuring, you know what, you can pause and read this stuff if you really want to see this stuff. You've got, I can only assume, an older commentary with the director and an older interview with the director, probably shot for maybe DVD release or maybe the first Blu-ray release, I don't know. Now this is the trailer that it must talk about on the cover, which I didn't watch. I probably should have. But I mean, this isn't a trailer for the movie Joysticks. It says coin slots, faux movie trailer / short written and directed by that guy. So I probably should have watched that, but since it wasn't a trailer for Joysticks, I was kind of like, why watch that? As we can see, reversible artwork, collectible two-sided mini poster. As far as the image quality goes on this Blu-ray release, it's absolutely stunning. I would say this is way better than this movie ever deserved to look. This is an absolutely stunning visual presentation. Me being a grain guy, I like my film grain. There's a nice decent amount of film grain throughout the course of the movie, probably more in certain spots than others, but definitely a top-notch, very film-like, wonderful visual presentation. On the audio front, being a real low-budget movie from the early 80s, it's obviously just mono. Nothing here to report any anomalies or problems or issues on the audio front that I can remember hearing. So on the video and audio front, an absolutely stellar presentation. Taking a look at the disc itself, it's actually kind of interesting what they did with the disc itself. I don't know, never having owned any 2600 games, physical versions, I don't know if this is something like a label of a 2600 game, or if this is supposed to, you know, signify something that I'm missing or something. But I do think it is kind of interesting how it's just this kind of square, like supposed to look like, I guess maybe a sticker for the label on the 2600 cartridge or something. That's all I can think of. But kind of an interesting appearance to the disc art here. And as they mention themselves on the back of the special features, you've got reversible cover art option. You've got the option for this cover art or this cover art, which I probably like the former cover art more. Neither of these two cover arts are the original theatrical poster. This one, just like with the one that comes shipped facing out, is edited with that dreaded, horrible image of the girl's hand holding the joystick. Got the spaceship covering over that and the two spaceships on each corner of the top of the arcade cabinet. I guess I don't know what the real point of doing this cover art is. They should have done their, you know, their edited cover art and then the original theatrical poster on the reverse. Not exactly sure what, I guess this is just an alternate version of, you know, MVD Rewind Collection's cover art, but a little bit disappointing you can't get the original poster art. Also included with this release, or at least the version I got, is a two-sided mini poster, which is just a bigger version of MVD Rewind Collection's, you know, covers for the release of this, you know, their release of this title. You've got this cover, which I prefer more, and this cover, which, looking at it a little further, I guess is supposed to, you know, replicate the 2600 video game cartridge, you know, cover, because it says movie disc used with Blu-ray players, so kind of like game cartridge used with Atari 2600 consoles or whatever the hell the covers of. I don't own any. Did I already say that? I never owned any 2600 games physically, so that might be something along the lines of what they say on the packaging of those games. But both versions, once again, edited with the dreaded picture. It can't show a painting of a woman's hand holding a joystick. Gosh forbid. Gosh darn it. I'd say, you know, all in all, the Blu-ray release and the packaging is actually really cool. So I'd probably more or less recommend the Blu-ray release if you can get it for $15 or less. Can't say I recommend the movie though. I mean, the movie is actually more or less garbage. A lot of, you know, some booby. I'm not Charles Band. Bosom garbage is kind of fun in this movie, and some attractive young women, of course. Like I say, the opening credits is probably the best part of of the movie, and that seems like there's another movie where that's the case as well. I'm sure there's a lot of movies where the opening credits are the best part of the movie. It escapes me what other movies that may be at this moment, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Guess that pretty much does it for this review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video.